The agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is renewing hope for Gaza and efforts to end the fighting there and bring the hostages home. Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that conditions to reach a deal to secure the release of captives have improved, but he adds a lot still needs to happen and a lot is still being done to get there. I want to bring in Moshe Lavi to discuss with us. His brother-in-law, Omri Miran, was abducted on October 7th after being held captive with his wife and two daughters who survived and were rescued. Moshe, thank you so much for being with us. I wonder what your reaction is to hearing Netanyahu say that there may be an opening for some kind of deal.
Thank you, Boris, for having me. We spoke exactly a year ago on Thanksgiving last year as the ceasefire and agreement, the hostage release agreement, temporary ceasefire, collapsed between Israel and Hamas. And since then, a lot has changed, but to be honest, not much change for us, families of hostages. I do not trust the words of the Prime Minister that the situation improved. For the mere fact that we've been told those messages since May and July, and especially July, by the entire security apparatus, that conditions have ripened, and yet the hostages are still held captive. Hostages were murdered since then. Others may have lost their lives. And of course, all of them were still alive under duress and torture by Hamas and their accomplices in Gaza. If he really thinks the conditions improved, he should enact and be bold, be courageous, and call for their release by signing the only viable way to bring them on, which is a deal.
And what was your reaction to this deal between Israel and Hezbollah, and now the accusations, both Hezbollah and Israel accusing each other of breaches of the ceasefire?
On one hand, I think the agreement with Hezbollah and the government of Lebanon is problematic. We are returning to the patterns we saw on the eve of October 7th, when the Israeli government is tolerating a terrorist organization that is threatening to keep attacking it, and is trying to silence it temporarily, only to have a much greater escalation in the future. So I'm very concerned by that. But on the other hand, what the agreement brought is the fact that Hamas is isolated more than ever at the moment. They have their closest ally that joined their fight on October 8th have left the scene at the moment. And perhaps that will push whoever left in Hamas leadership in Gaza to understand that they need to stop sacrificing the life of their own people, sacrificing the future of the Gaza Strip, and seal a deal. Depart the Gaza Strip themselves as a leadership and allowing Israel to bring home the hostages and bring the humanitarian need and alleviate the humanitarian need of the Gazans.
I do wonder, given that we've spoken to experts who believe that Netanyahu agreed to this ceasefire deal with Hezbollah in part because he wanted to make President-elect Donald Trump happy, how you feel about the chances of a deal under an incoming Trump administration, how they might handle Netanyahu and the region?
First and foremost, I will say that like many other families of hostages, I'm thankful for the efforts of the Biden administration since October 7th to secure the release, to prioritize the hostage crisis above other objective that needs to be achieved in the conflict with Hamas, both in the short term and of course long term. On the other hand, the Biden administration failed. They failed when it comes to Hamas and their sponsors like Qatar, Turkey, Iran. They kept emboldening them, kept harboring them, kept funneling money possibly to them over the past year. On the other hand, they were not able to push the Israeli Prime Minister and the Israeli government to understand that we managed to dismantle Hamas militarily, and in the short term, we need to achieve the other objective of this war, which is returning home the hostages. So the Biden administration failed on both those fronts. I hope the Trump administration will be able to force the Prime Minister to understand that we need to prioritize the return of the hostages. We need to prioritize a larger kind of vision for this future between us, the Palestinians, and the wider region, Saudi Arabia, of course, and then other actors in the region. And perhaps we can return to what was the peace plan that the Trump administration proposed at the time and the Abraham Accords. But the first step will be signing an agreement, bringing home the hostages, and provide humanitarian care for the Gazans. Sadly, the Trump associates were informed in the past few weeks by unknown Israelis or those close to the Israeli government that most of the hostages are dead. But actually, we know from the Israeli intelligence that more than half of them are still alive. And I hope Trump's people are listening to this interview and will keep listening to the families of hostages who are asking them, we need to act now in the transition period so that they'll be home by your inauguration on January 20th.
Moshe, have you gotten any update on your brother-in-law Omri's condition?
The last time we saw Omri was when Hamas released a psychological warfare video of him in late April. His conditions were, he seems like he lost a lot of weight, lost a spark in his eye, and the joy that is really what Omri is. He's a really joyful and caring and kind human being. And we haven't heard or saw him since. We do get updates from the IDF, like many other families, about what they believe are the current assessment of the hostages, including Omri. We have no reason to believe he's not alive. We believe he is alive, and we'll keep advocating with the administration here in the US, with our own government on the streets, because they breached the trust and are trying to silence the dissent from the people. And of course, when we go to the parliament in Israel and the Knesset, we'll keep advocating with publics worldwide and decision makers worldwide, because there are still more than half of the hostages, more than half of the 101 hostages that we can still save. We can still save their life, reunite them with their families. And I don't want to meet you again in next Thanksgiving. I don't know if you remember, we talked about the Odyssey last Thanksgiving. And sadly, this Odyssey continues. And our Odysseus, in this case, Omri, continues to suffer, while Lishai, my sister, suffering in other ways, waiting for him to return and advocating for his return.
Yeah, Moshe, it is disappointing that it's been a year since we had that conversation and not much has changed for Omri and for the other hostages. We do appreciate you coming on to share his story with us and with the world as well, and our hearts go out to you and your family. Moshe Lavi, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Stay with CNN. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.